Comebacks are such a hard thing to do. Like, you create something people like and know and remember, and then one day you stop, and then you're just expected to come back? And how does one come back? Because the longer one has been gone, the harder a comeback is. The more expectation there's placed on a return. The more the world around you has changed, the more your own image and perception in the public has changed. Hell, the more you've changed. And as much as you would want to just go back to normal, do the same thing you once did, and pick up right where you left off, it just won't be the same because you aren't the same. It's a depressing and terrifying realization. Anyway, Kitchen Nightmares is back. It feels kind of weird to say Kitchen Nightmares is back, because in a way it feels like it never really left. Part of this is because Ramsay has never stopped appearing on television. If anything, the amount of shows he's been on has grown exponentially. He's even infected the frozen food aisle at this point. But also it feels weird to say Kitchen Nightmares is back because, in a lot of respects, you could say that Kitchen Nightmares is more popular now than it was when it came out. Compared to other 2000s era reality TV content, Kitchen Nightmares has managed to keep itself consistently relevant by making it so easily accessible on online platforms. Basically, every episode is online, for free, on YouTube, on official channels, and with near daily uploads, often with clickbait or meme titles. For years now, the YouTube channel has been finding new ways to repackage the same episodes and clips over and over again, and still get healthy amounts of views. And unlike Gordon Ramsay's other big show, Hell's Kitchen, the lack of an extended season-long narrative and contestants means that you're basically guaranteed to understand what's going on no matter what clip or episode you click on. All this to say, it makes sense that they would see the mainstream popularity of Kitchen Nightmares and decide to bring it back. That's not surprising. What is surprising, however, is that the new season of Kitchen Nightmares is bad. Like, noticeably bad. Worse than the original 7 seasons. And that's bizarre because having watched the original run of Kitchen Nightmares all the way through at least 3 times now, I honestly can't say I noticed any major changes or shifts in quality throughout. And yet almost right away, I could tell that the new season of the show felt off. And even weirder, it's not as if there's a blatant shift in how the show is structured. At a casual glance, the show is the same as it ever was. And yet, it's noticeably weaker. It's like coming home to someone who looks like your wife and sounds like your wife, but doesn't talk like your wife. Doesn't move like your wife. When she smiles, her lips curl into the grin of a stranger. So what I want to do here is try to diagnose why. Why does this newest season not work? What is it in the formula that's off now? But in order to do that, we first have to talk about what the formula for Kitchen Nightmares is. So a few years ago, I made a video that I don't remember making going over the narrative construction of Kitchen Nightmares. In it, I apparently went through the ways in which Kitchen Nightmares deliberately structures its episodes in order to fit the standard 3-act structure we expect to see in stories. And while I still stand by what I supposedly said in that video, I do think I simplified things a bit for the sake of an argument. I'm going to assume that if you're clicking on this that you already know what Kitchen Nightmares' whole deal is. Celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay visits a struggling restaurant and strives to change it and improve it before he walks off with no sense of direction down the street. Kitchen Nightmares is a very tropey, repetitive show. So much so that my friend Red and I managed to make a Kitchen Nightmares bingo sheet for our watch parties. I'll include the list in the description so you can plug it into whatever bingo board generator you want and play along. In order to make sure its narrative is clear in every episode, Kitchen Nightmares tends to follow the 3-act structure, one with inciting incidents, and rising actions, and turning points, and climax, and conclusion. But what's interesting is that when you dive deeper, the formula gets a little more complicated, and I really do mean a little, because while the general story arc will always be the same, the difference between episodes is the protagonist and their character arc. That is to say, who gets the brunt of the focus in the episode, and what is the obstacle they need to overcome. Generally speaking, a basic Kitchen Nightmares episode will focus on the restaurant owner as the protagonist, as their struggle to maintain their restaurant is the primary focus of the show. However, the what and how of the restaurant struggles are going to be its own classification. For my own sake, I've come up with 4 categories of Kitchen Nightmares episodes. Owner's fault, chef's fault, staff's fault, family's fault. These aren't mutually exclusive, and a lot of episodes see crossover between multiple, if not all, of these categories. However, there is almost always a central web that connects them all. Let's take a classic example, the Burger Kitchen two-parter in Season 4. The episode is about owner Alan Safran, son of one of Australia's most notorious gangsters, who stole $250,000 from his son Daniel in order to start the restaurant and is now getting the whole family into debt. In this, we also have Chef David Blaine, who feuds with Alan's wife Jen and ends up fired at the end of the first episode for being combative against Alan's son Daniel. Additionally, Daniel feels like he's being taken advantage of and is underappreciated in the job, as well as overworked and unqualified. So already here we can see 3 of 4 categories in this episode. The chef not getting along with the owners could be classified as chef's fault. The tension between Alan and his son could be classified as family's fault because of Daniel's inability to fully invest into the restaurant because it's not what he wants to do. However, the real central focus of the episode falls more into the category of owner's fault, as the conflict revolves not around these smaller scale dramas, but more how they fit into the wider whole of Alan's stubbornness and his refusal to listen and adapt to the people and reality around him. Generally speaking, this is something the original series is quite good at, identifying who to focus on and what arc they need to go through in order to present an improvement by the end of the episode, and how to match that arc to the needed beats of the episode, such as the taste test, the kitchen inspection, etc., etc. This adherence to narrative structure helps make every episode feel like a complete, satisfactory story. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about the new show. So the Kitchen Nightmares revival, designated as Season 8 of the show overall, began airing last year in September of 2023. I watched in eager anticipation, wanting to see what Ramsay would bring us after a decade, with the knowledge that usually you want one of your more explosive, compelling cases to open up your season, and in this case, your return. And when you started out the first episode, Bel Air, you think everything is as good as it ever was. Gordon goes to a diner with a menu that's way too big. He gets served terrible-looking fried food. He explores the kitchen, and it looks like the basement entrance to Resident Evil 7. It's the same as it ever was, now just with an older Gordon and a Deadpool and Wolverine-style color grading. But as the episode goes on, things start to feel off. They start to attempt to set in the central narrative of the episode, and it's that the kids need to step up and take over the restaurant from the exhausted parents, but that really doesn't come through. Like, we barely see the parents in the first half, and we mostly focus on the son Cal, who is there when Ramsay comes in, has a personal one-on-one convo with him, interacts with the staff, and is credited in the episode as the owner. So the sudden turn into, you need to step up so your parents don't have to do all this, doesn't really land when we don't really see the parents do much to begin with. The end result is an episode that hits the moment-to-moment of what we expect a Kitchen Nightmares episode, but lacks an effective narrative weight to it. It doesn't reach a conclusion so much as it just stops. This is a problem that becomes more and more prevalent as the season goes on. These weird, forced plots that don't really meld together, that feel as though Gordon and the producers picked an angle for the episode before filming ever actually began, and now have to try to edit whatever they can to fit that angle. Take episode 3, for example, which takes place at a restaurant on a golf course called In the Drink. Now, this episode does have a lot of compelling stuff in it. A messy, too small kitchen, the most boring restaurant design in the world, an overworked staff, and a stubborn owner in debt. And while the episode is one of the better ones of the season, it still has the weirdness of devoting a strange amount of attention to the golf cart the restaurant owns. With a large part of Ramsay's renovation plans dedicated to him pushing the golf cart as a way to sell food to golfers on the course. It's not a bad idea, but it's a strange amount of focus that doesn't seem to really address the central issue of the owner being a stubborn and overbearing boss. So when Ramsay brings the golf cart with its fancy wraps and whatnot, and golfers conveniently start wanting a wrap and asking for one when the cart is on the green, it doesn't feel satisfying either for the narrative or the characters. This is a man who hired an untrained chef and had him work 21 days straight with no pay. A golf cart isn't suddenly going to fix that. This is an issue that has always plagued Kitchen Nightmares, but seems even more prevalent in this season. There are some restaurants where it's extremely clear that there's no hope here, that the owners are in so much debt, that they're so incompetent or malicious in their management that any sort of rehabilitation is impossible, and you'd be better off just telling them to go ahead and sell the place then and there. Take episode 4, The Mimo. It's about a pizza place in New Jersey started by the worst type of people, a cop and her TikTok influencer sons. Said cop, by her own admission, has no food or restaurant experience. She doesn't know how to run the restaurant on a basic level. She bought this for fun. There's no way this place is staying open, right? Like, not unless the owner really steps up and learns her shit. And yet that's not what the episode is about. The episode is actually primarily about how the sons need to step in and use their TikTok fame to help promote the restaurant. Once again, we have this narrative dissonance where the obvious hook and problem of owner's fault is ignored in favor of a predetermined family's fault outcome. As a result, and because of the sheer unlikability of any of the people involved, I'd go as far as to say this is the worst Kitchen Nightmares episode I've seen, because it's just dull and frustrating and nothing matters. And on the subject of businesses with no hope, there's episode 6, Love Bites. This one is dramatic, but not in a fun way, more an uncomfortable way. It's a restaurant owned by couple Tess and Chris, who have been running it for 5 years and who have found it putting a strain on their relationship. And strain is putting it lightly, because based on this episode, Chris is nothing but emotionally abusive to Tess. Yelling at her, calling her inadequate, pointing out every failure, whether deserved or not.
We just make sure that the crab benedict are, like, really
Shut up!
for Gordon.
Leave me alone and I can do what I do.
While Tess spends most of the episode crying, going over her medical history, in which she had 25 surgeries, had her colon taken out, and lost 18 feet of intestines, and yet is still working long hours here to keep the business up and running. I don't know how much of the Tess and Chris relationship is true in real life, and how much was exaggerated for the show during filming and editing, but at the very least, the way it's presented here creates this uncomfortable scenario of a restaurant that is clearly making these two miserable in their own ways, who are not happy with each other, to the point where Tess says she's considering breaking off her engagement to Chris. And yet, because this is Kitchen Nightmares, and the kitchen has to be renovated and not just closed, the episode instead focuses on trying to get these two to get along, and get Chris to chill, and get the restaurant back on track, even though the writing is clearly on the wall. And that's not an exaggeration, because one of the problems with the modern internet landscape is that it's a lot easier for people to find out where Kitchen Nightmares is filming and get updates on those locations, and for the staff of said locations to get their perspectives and statements out. That's how we know that Love Bites was already sold to another owner in between the time they applied to Kitchen Nightmares and when the producers got back to them, and within a month after Gordon finished filming there, they had already closed and been rebranded by the new owners. I assume that Gordon and his team knew that the restaurant had been sold before filming started. Like, it ends with the announcement that the place had been sold during the little post-episode epilogue. And yet they filmed the episode here anyway, as if any of it even mattered, which might not affect you if you're not online looking up things about the new Kitchen Nightmare season in anticipation before the premiere, but if you are, it kills a lot of the dramatic tension and makes you wonder why they went with the angle of improving the restaurant, instead of trying something new and focusing on the realities that maybe it is best to close and sell and try something else before things get worse. The conflict between the structure of Kitchen Nightmares and the reality of the modern day is something that comes up a lot this season. Like, when it's not stuff like finding sales listing for the cop TikTok pizza place before the episode airs, it's the fact that we all now are a lot more connected than we used to be, and word about truly bad restaurants and their issues get around more quickly. We have Yelp, we have Google reviews, we have Uber Eats ratings, and that Joe is Hungry guy who goes to fast food places and talks about their new items in the most over-edited style you've seen in your life. I love that channel so fucking much. On one hand, you'd think that it would be easier for Ramsey & Co. to find new stuff to cover. Do that YouTuber thing where it's like, we went to the lowest rated nail salon at Washington Heights, and then see how bad it is, but the reality is a lot of these places that are being covered in this new season seem fine. They seem fine. They have issues, and those issues are things that cannot be simply fixed by a change of menu. They're fine. Because here's something we have to address, the elephant in the room. This show is made post-COVID, and much like how the recession looms over the original run of Kitchen Nightmares, COVID is kind of always in the back of my mind when watching the new season. COVID already forced a lot of the really bad doomed kitchens to close. It caused awareness over workplace safety and sanitation in a way that will make it harder to find these truly disgusting rundown kitchens the way that they used to. Places that couldn't adapt to the world of the pandemic or recover after aren't around right now to be on the show to begin with. This means that the episodes that don't have anything egregiously wrong with them often just come off as unnecessary padding, which is why I'm not going into detail about every single episode this season, because most of it is just boring. Like, for starters, There's no use going into the Max Bar and Grill episode, because in my personal opinion, if your restaurant has a Wikipedia page with a 100-year history before Ramsay ever went there, you're probably fine. You do not need to be on this show. There's nothing the show can do for you. Why would I watch this? There's this episode that really shows the limitations of Kitsch Night formula while also being the best episode of the season, in my opinion. Basque 46 is a standard sports bar type of place with food that looks perfectly cromulent, if not good. It seems in line with what you'd expect from an Applebee's or a Chili's or a Cheddar's or whatever. And it's not even the first or even second restaurant owned by the owners. It's just the most recent one. And I mean recent, like recent, as in 3 months old. As such, there's nothing really that scandalous here. Like, the kitchen is fine. Even if the staff were incompetent about prep and cleaning, it hasn't been opened long enough for it to be an issue. A change in the status quo being brought in by Ramsay won't mean anything because the restaurant hasn't even been opened long enough to establish a status quo. It's 3 months old. Can it even crawl yet? I don't know anything about babies. Can you tell? They scare me. There's this really funny moment towards the end of the episode where, okay, like, you know how every Kitchen Nightmares episode has a renovation of some kind? Where they have, like, their team work overnight to redecorate and modify the place to make it more modern and contemporary. And generally speaking, these renovations are bad. Like, clearly made as cheaply and quickly as possible, trying to lean into whatever basic trope they can. My personal favorite being the episode where Ramsay's team just attached a bunch of suitcases to the wall to signify that it's a worldly restaurant. That is to say, these renovations are often extensive and often for the worse, unless the place is just really, really, really bad and bland like in The Drink is. But with Basque 46, you have a problem. This place has only been open for 3 months. There's no need for renovations, because everything is already new. So what do? They add tables outside the restaurant. That's it. Okay, that's not entirely true. They say they added tables, but actually, earlier in the episode, they step outside and you can see they already had tables outside. So really, all Ramsay did was add some cushions to the chairs and a little flower vases, and now the owners have to stand there and pretend that they're really impressed with it. They don't even seem to notice the renovation before it's pointed out to them. It's an incredible moment where the facade just breaks and you realize, wow, this show is pointless. At the very least, this episode is the one that has the most successful narrative focus out of all of them. Mainly that the problem is due to the head chef, who I will only refer to as his nickname, the culinary gangster, who gets paid too much and doesn't really get along with anyone and seems like a real asshole, not just on camera, but off camera too, because this man has a TikTok account and it's the exact type of stuff you expect from a guy from Jersey named the culinary gangster to act.
How you doing, people? It's the culinary gangster. I'm having a great time responding to all your comments. I am. Thank you for all of you that have supported me. Thank you for those that don't, because I really don't give a shit.
And he's responsible for the second funniest moment in the season, where they make a big deal on how he's improved as a chef and is excited to make fresh original dishes in the restaurant, only to immediately reveal in the epilogue that the culinary gangster no-showed for work the next day and hasn't stepped foot in the restaurant since. If the entire season could have a focus on such a strong personality as the culinary gangster each episode, it would be all the better for it. But since it doesn't, it really just feels like an uneven mess of narrative confusion and obligation. If you can indulge me for a second, I want to take a little detour. Okay, so in between the end of Kitchen Nightmares and the Kitchen Nightmares rebuilds, there were two different shows hosted by Gordon that had similar premises. The first is Hotel Hell. The second is 24 Hours to Hell and Back. These shows are quite similar to each other and to Kitchen Nightmares, but also different in many important, easily observable ways. For starters, To Hell and Back is the show where Gordon puts on too many clothes, and Hotel Hell is the show where Gordon takes off all his clothes. Hotel Hell's title is self-explanatory, while 24 Hours to Hell and Back sounds like the title to a PS3 game. Hotel Hell is a fairly low-key show. 24 Hours to Hell and Back is all about being extra. There's not much to say about Hotel Hell. It is exactly what you think it would be based on the title. It is a version of Kitchen Nightmares themed entirely around Ramsay visiting hotels. The show is otherwise indistinguishable from its culinary counterpart, down to the fact that the show always starts with Gordon sampling the food at the hotel, and a lot of emphasis placed on how to improve the kitchen. Hotel Hell is even featured on the same YouTube channel as Kitchen Nightmares. Like, the shows are basically the same, except for the fact that Gordon will occasionally do something like examine the carpet in his room for traces of diarrhea. Because of this, though, it does mean that at the very least, Hotel Hell is watchable in basically the exact same way Kitchen Nightmares is. 24 Hours to Hell and Back is the more interesting one to talk about, because in some ways it's a blatant attempt to go back to the formula of Kitchen Nightmares, while also weirdly overcomplicating the idea. Once again, we have Ramsay going to failing restaurants and trying to turn them around. But this time there's 3 big gimmicks. 1. Gordon puts on a disguise for his first visit. 2. Gordon keeps his staff in a big-ass trailer that looks like the set for 22 Jump Street. 3. Gordon keeps the restaurant staff, and sometimes the customers, there for 24 hours. Gordon is only there for 24 hours. This is confusing to me. You know when a video game series starts off with a cool premise and gameplay, and then suddenly they feel like they have to keep adding more and more mechanics and gimmicks each game because they feel like they have to, and by the end of it, it just gets more diluted over time, where it's hard to even remember what the original appeal of the series was anymore? That's, for me, the To Hell and Back experience. By limiting the restaurant improvement experience to 24 hours, you get this weird sense of rushed pressure. There's no time to really marinate in anything or let something just play out, because it's constantly trying to pace itself to hit the beats that a show like this needs to hit, regardless of if those beats are earned or not. Kitchen Nightmares was never a heartwarming show. God, no. Any attempts at emotional beats in the show just don't hit for me because they're attached to the reality show industrial complex. But at the same time, those beats are there. There's a reason why you can still feel emotionally affected when you see a terrible owner or a staff member being treated badly, or Gordon having to go give a pep talk to someone to get their life together. I don't believe that it's real, but I can feel something watching it. It feels earned in a way that To Hell and Back doesn't. Even if the show isn't actually filmed in 24 hours, it's still presented as if it is, with a constant timer clocking down, which means Gordon is applying more pressure on the staff on camera, which ends up in the edit, which leads to a show that's leaner and meaner, but lacks the in-betweener that makes a show like this compelling. There's very little time for fun, for jokes, for scenes, for moments. It's constantly on the go. There aren't even 2-parters because each episode theoretically has to take the same amount of time. It's unpleasant. It hits the beats of Kitchen Nightmares, but in a way that's so unsatisfying that I honestly don't really enjoy watching the show. It is the only one of these series that I straight up haven't finished because it's not a good time. It's like making a grilled cheese, but insisting on putting short rib and mushrooms on it. You've overcomplicated something that was supposed to be so simple. And that's not even getting into the episode where Gordon goes to a restaurant in the French Quarter to make the most mediocre-looking Cajun cuisine I've seen, and forces them to cut the portions down. Like, come on, man, it's the fucking French Quarter. I bring this up because I think the reboot of Kitchen Nightmares shares more DNA with 24 Hours to Hell and Back than it does with its original 7 seasons. The issues it has started here. The confusing narratives, the rushed stories, the forced meanness. Much like the new season, To Hell and Back focuses so much on following formula that it misses any concept of humanity. These shows are also tied because 24 Hours to Hell and Back also has the shadow of COVID looming over it. The show ran for 3 seasons up until February of 2020, when suddenly something weird happened, and the idea of traveling across the country to keep a bunch of people you don't know together in an enclosed environment for an extended period of time didn't really seem doable anymore. Because of this, 24 Hours to Hell and Back didn't really end or get canceled so much as it just stopped. What happens then is this period of time where there aren't any Ramsay renovation shows on American television, as the way media is made has to change for a while. And during this time, the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel, which was already big and prolific, starts to get even bigger and more prolific, and notable for its meme energy, and gets plenty of repeat viewers as people flock to familiar comforts and easy-to-watch territory in troubled times. all leading up to May of 2023 when they announced that Kitchen Nightmares would be coming back for an 8th season and would start filming that month, wrapping up around the end of June, which is a really fast turnaround. Hey, you know what else happened in summer 2023? Specifically right after June of 2023? Oh yeah, the Screen Actors Guild strike, which followed up the writer's strike that had started earlier in March, 2 months before the Kitchen Nightmares reboot started. Now, am I implying that the newest season of Kitchen Nightmares was a rushed product filmed extremely quickly in order to have content for Fox during the fall 2023 season to compensate for the writers and actors being on strike at the same time while utilizing the suddenly more popular Kitchen Nightmares branding? Well, look, I don't know anything officially, so I can't say for certain. Please don't sue me, Gordon Ramsay. But I'll say this. One of the things that's notable about Kitchen Nightmares, even Hotel Hell and To Hell and Back, is its ability to find unique restaurants with their own unique problems and culinary needs from all over the country, which leads to a large amount of variety between episodes. A pasta place in Virginia is going to be approached differently than a seafood place in Metairie, which is going to be handled differently than a Mexican food place in California. Even if Gordon Ramsay doesn't always knock these cuisines out of the park, seriously, you're making this fancy French Quarter restaurant look shitty in comparison to Acme Oyster House off Veterans in Causeway. It's still an interesting experience. This trend of finding different restaurants from all across the country is continued in Season 8, which finds Gordon going to exciting locales such as New York, New Jersey, New Jersey, New Jersey, New York, New York, New York, New York, New Jersey, New York! For whatever reason, literally all the episodes in this season were filmed exclusively in either New York or New Jersey. Just those two very specific, close-together states. Now, whether this was a cost-saving measure or them testing the waters on a reboot to see if the ratings justify the cost of traveling further, or to make sure that Gordon can still be in town to help out his Times Square fish and chips restaurant, which he advertises in the season premiere, by the way. Like, he's like, come learn at my fish and chips restaurant. It's so fancy. But more than anything, I think it's clear that an effort was made here to find locations that were close together and could be traveled to fairly quickly so they could film everything before the end of June. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's the reason why this doesn't work. Because maybe Season 8 wasn't meant to be a good season of television so much as it was meant to just be content. Content to go out quickly and efficiently and before the deadline. Regardless of whether or not that was the intention, it's certainly what the season feels like. Or maybe this is just Ramsay's style now. To Hell and Back didn't have any strikes limiting it, nor any location limitations, and it still has the same issues, more issues really. Maybe Ramsay's brand of television has been reduced to nothing more than hitting beats to a metronome designed to make appealing YouTube clips of meltdowns and gross kitchen reactions. If that's the standard we're going by, then I guess this season succeeded, but I don't know, I'd like to think he could do better than that. Kitchen Nightmares has already been renewed for a Season 9, which isn't a surprise. I'm sure Season 8 still did well in ratings, and the show doesn't cost much to produce, and the Kitchen Nightmares YouTube channel is still as popular as ever, which means the brand is still as popular as ever. And we already know that Gordon is going to more places than just New York and New Jersey this time, as he's already announced that he's willing to do more harm to New Orleans once again. I can only hope that Season 8 was a strange fluke, and that now the show can grow past being boring television junk food and return to being entertaining television junk food. If you can't tell, I really like talking about Gordon Ramsay and all the weirdness that goes on in his productions. I actually had a whole other section here just about Gordon Ramsay's failed attempts to make grilled cheeses that got cut from this version of the vid. I ended up loving that part so much that I extended it into its own bonus video all about the philosophy of Gordon's grilled cheese making, and I put it up on my streaming service Nebula. If you're not aware, Nebula is an independent creator-owned streaming platform that specializes in thoughtful content, from essays to documentaries to classes to even original shows and movies. It's like Netflix, but for people with incredibly niche hyperfixations that you don't get to talk about in person and don't easily find stuff on because nobody else cares about it the same way that you care about it. There's countless stuff to choose from there, either from creators you know or from potentially new faves. If you're watching this video, then you're probably a fan of video essayists whose initials are LE. Did you know Lindsay Ellis has been making a bunch of Nebula exclusive essays, and that she just recently did one ranking all of the X-Men movies? It's an incredibly fun video, and I had to sit through Dark Phoenix again while she was making it, so, you know, it was an actual act of sacrifice that went into that production. And if you want narrative content, friend of the channel Jessie Gender released her short film Identities, which is excellent and highly recommended if you're a fan of science fiction like I am, and also stars other friend of the channel, Maggie Mayfish, who is like the nicest person alive and so talented. Plus now Nebula has guest passes, meaning that monthly members get 1 guest pass to Nebula per month to share with a friend, and annual or lifetime members get 3 guest passes per quarter. So when you find a show or movie on Nebula that you want someone you know to watch so they can also obsessively geek out about it with you, you can bring them into the fold without you having to spend any more money or them having to give out any of their own payment info just to do like a free trial. No cost, all reward. And what's cool is that by going to nebula.tv/LadyEmily, you can get 40% off the cost of a yearly subscription, making it only $36 or $3 a month, which makes Nebula an incredible value when you consider the large amount of art and thoughtful original work that's hosted on the site already. So once again, go to nebula.tv/LadyEmily to get 40% off a year's worth of Nebula. Wow, okay, it has been a while. Thank you all for watching this video. Thank you all for sticking to the end. Thank you all for sticking by so far. I just wanted to thank all the patrons whose names are going on screen right now. If I could say all of their names, I would. There's a lot of them, but I will specifically go out of my way to mention Darren Ost, Hannah Green, Maxwell Lynch, Pieman III, Ross Vincent, that Fire Emblem Lord who dies halfway through his own game, and Weeaboo William. I greatly appreciate the support from all of you here. I'm not even kidding when I say that I would not be able to be here after such a long break if it wasn't for my patrons. So thank you so much. I didn't think I'd see another video, so thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest, part of the reason why I used Burger Kitchen as my example early on in the video is because I really wanted to talk about how the son in that episode, David Safran, the one that got the money stolen from him, during the time that show was made and then afterwards, he was doing BDSM coaching and like running BDSM clubs and stuff like that, which would be whatever, but then just last year, he and another guy got charged by the United States government for having a cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme where he stole $25 million while using the name Bitcoin Yoda. And I just, the Burger Kitchen episode just gets better the more you find out about it.